If only a select few have the materials, why aren't the other defense contractors suing them to get in on the game?
Look, that's a very good point, Bryce. And look, under the SEC laws, under your disclosure laws in your public corporations laws in America, like here in Australia and in Europe and the UK, there is a requirement for full and continuous disclosure. So if you're floated on the American Stock Exchange as a public corporation like Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman, one of the big defense aerospace companies, you're obliged to reveal anything that is material to your share price. And so if somebody buys shares and sells those shares without ever being told that they're sitting on, maybe Lockheed Martin, for example, let's just hypothesize Lockheed Martin. Let's suggest that, say, Lockheed Martin had a couple of flying saucers sitting in their basement, possibly the most valuable items on the planet. It would be materially relevant to the share price of that corporation that the shareholders are not being told the value of the assets that are held within the company. And if somebody sold their shares, they would have a legitimate claim on the corporation for not revealing the extent of their interests in those assets. And I do know there are plaintiff lawyers that are already in the process of preparing legal actions. And this may be one of the ways that this story is eventually pried out into the open. And I can tell you, I mean, I've had conversations with not high level, but fairly senior executives in one defense aerospace corporation that reached out at me. And they were speaking hypothetically, but clearly with intent. And we were discussing exactly this point, that there is an obligation on corporations to disclose what they have because it's materially relevant to share price. And those corporations, if it's true that they are sitting on recovered non-human technology, it is the most valuable item on the planet, beyond any shadow of a doubt. It'd be worth more than anything else. And I can see why they would be fighting to keep control of that technology. And I can see why they would also be terrified of having to account to their shareholders for the fact that they've never revealed that they've got it.
It's it's a problem. It's interesting. About a decade ago, Richard Dolan and I wrote AD After Disclosure, which is relevant to what everybody is talking about right now. Is there going to be disclosure, confirmation, limited disclosure, catastrophic disclosure? You know, you pick from the menu what you think. But one thing that Dolan and I stumbled across as a core belief early on was that a lot of how disclosure will be handled has already been sort of laid out in how we've handled other things. So, for example, we came to the conclusion that the courts would be extremely active in disclosure. We have just raised one of those issues right now. As an example, the eminent domain issue ultimately won't be resolved by what Ross thinks or I think. It'll be resolved eventually in a court. Another great example of that, just so you can do your own homework at home thinking about these possibilities. But one of them would be, okay, if the government knew about the existence of UAP and had seen proof of it and felt that it was a complicating factor for air safety, then there's probably some class action suits that could be filed. What about all the passengers who wouldn't have gotten on a plane if they thought that there were really UAP flying around there? What about all the pilots who tried to report a UFO and then found their career floundering because they were ridiculed and stigmatized? A lot of these people may have lawsuits in the future, and it won't stop with those issues. Like I say, there's going to be a lot of things that are on the table.